The singer Michael Jackson is reported to have died from a heart attack.
Drive to UCLA's medical center, but it appeared it was already.
He arrived in hospital in a deep coma and is dying.
And apparently suffered a heart
Race
attack.
to save the
At 2:26 p.m. on June 25th, 2009, Michael Jackson, controversial megastar, entertainer, and pop icon, was pronounced dead in Los Angeles.
Jackson arrived. Brother Jermaine says no one gave up.
Jackson was just 50 years old.
The sidewalk outside the hospital quickly became a strange mix of grieving for a loss and celebrating a unique brand of music.
His sudden and unexplained death sparked a police investigation that examined every detail of his passing.
Robbery homicide was assigned to this because of the high-profile nature of it.
Jackson's body was choppered to USC.
His body was examined by a team of medical experts.
It is believed he suffered cardiac arrest in his home. However, the cause of his death is unknown until results of the autopsy are known.
Michael Jackson was one of the most famous men on the planet, but it was no secret that he led a very troubled life. His was a shocking and unexpected death, but I know that the information in his autopsy report will separate fact from fiction and tell me exactly what caused his demise.
World-renowned medical examiner and forensic pathologist Dr. Michael Hunter has conducted over 4,000 autopsies. Working closely with law enforcement and other forensic specialists, his pivotal role in investigating suspicious cases has revealed the truth behind mysterious deaths for over 20 years.
This is the coroner's report into the death of Michael Jackson. It's very extensive and contains numerous details into his private and personal life. But importantly, it gives me a valuable timeline of the events leading up to his death. So this and first-hand accounts, I'm going to uncover exactly what happened to end the life of the King of Pop.
11:30 a.m., June 24th, 2009, Los Angeles, California, one day before his death. Jackson is renting a mansion in Beverly Hills. In just 19 days, he'll embark on a sellout 50-day residency in London. 40 years previously, Michael Jackson had burst onto the music scene. As the lead singer with the Jackson 5, he was propelled to international megastardom.
Michael Jackson was the king of pop. He was a king of entertainment. He did things that no one else could do. He was untouchable.
Jackson was the most successful entertainer the world had ever seen. Combined song and concert sales netted him an estimated $750 million. But by June 2009, his personal fortune had all but gone. High-profile court cases and reckless spending had left him on the brink of bankruptcy.
Michael Jackson had essentially been a recluse for 12 years, not touring, not really having any huge record releases like his past. He was around $400 million in debt. He also had over 30 lawsuits lined up against him.
June 24th, 2009, Los Angeles, California, one day before his death. To ease his mounting debts, Jackson will perform a grueling schedule of concerts in London. And to maintain his health, he's depending on his personal physician, Dr. Conrad Murray. But Jackson will never make opening night.
I know that Michael Jackson was still a relatively young man when he died. He had been a performer all his life and had been incredibly fit. The fact that he was preparing to perform on stage in a string of concerts suggests he was still relatively fit. So at this point, it's unclear exactly what would have caused his untimely death.
Jackson's life was dogged with moments that were both controversial and bizarre. And the secrets revealed by his autopsy are no different.
The autopsy report states that Michael was black, and that is of course correct. But if you look at the body objectively, not knowing it was Michael Jackson, it wouldn't be that clear cut.
Millions of column inches have been devoted to the subject of Michael's skin. Was he black? Was he turning white? Was he turning himself white? These are the questions that everyone wanted to know.
The color of your skin is obviously different than it was when you were younger. And so
Jackson tried to quash the rumors in a TV interview,
it's caused a great deal of
but the manner of his body language and answers meant few believed him.
are doing. Are you bleaching your skin? And is your skin lighter because you don't like being black?
I have a skin disorder that destroys the pigmentation of the skin. It's something that I cannot help. Okay, but when people make up stories that I don't want to be who I am, it hurts me.
I can see from the autopsy that just as Michael maintained, he did have a skin condition. In the darker areas, there are lighter blotches, and it appears that in these lighter blotches, the skin has stopped producing pigment. Cells called melanocytes produce a dark pigment, melanin, that colors the skin. But these cells are partially absent in the autopsy. And without these cells, the skin is pale and explains Michael's appearance. And it is consistent with a disease called vitiligo.
So Jackson did have a skin disease, but doubts still remained about all the claims he made in the interview.
I just want to get this straight. You
Yeah.
are not taking anything to change the color of your skin.
Oh God, no.
You did not
We're
purposely.
trying to control it, and using makeup
Mhm.
evens it out because it makes blotches on the skin, and I have to even out my skin.
But evidence found at the scene shows that this wasn't true. Jackson spent large amounts of money on a skin bleaching drug called Benequin.
It turns out that Michael had been getting treatment for his vitiligo from a doctor called Arnold Klein for about 25 years.
Based in Beverly Hills, Klein was the dermatologist to the stars. His other clients included Elizabeth Taylor, Carrie Fisher, and Sharon Stone. Klein recommended the lotion to Jackson when they first met. It prevents dark pigment being made in areas unaffected by vitiligo. For half of his life, Jackson had been bleaching his skin. And in the autopsy report, Dr. Hunter has discovered just how fixated with his appearance the king of pop really was.
I can see that there are several scars on Michael's face and neck that are typical of previous plastic surgeries. He had a cleft inserted into his chin, which would certainly have changed his appearance. His nose shows very clear signs of modification. It's caved in on one side and the bridge is completely missing. This is one of the signs of extensive plastic surgery.
His brothers used to tease him about the size of his nose, calling him Big Nose. It really left an emotional scar on him, and the minute he found out about plastic surgery, he began to have work on his nose.
One of the things that Michael struggled with throughout his whole life was his body image. I don't like my skin turns into I don't like my face, turns into I don't like my body, turns into I'm not sure I like myself. That's why body image, poor body image is so insidious, because it never stops with the nose or the hair or the legs or whatever, aspect of our appearance we don't like. It transforms into something bigger.
Over the years, Jackson visited the surgeon's table again and again, changing not only his nose, but almost his entire face. In the tabloid press, he became known as Wacko Jacko and was public property. But the autopsy reveals he did manage to keep one secret from the media for 25 years.
I can see that Michael's hair is not his own. He's wearing a wig and is held on by semi-permanent glue. There are some sparse areas of his own hair on the sides and back of his head, but other than for those patches, Michael was almost entirely bald.
Despite being a tabloid target, he had kept this hidden for over a quarter of a century.
His scalp reveals the reason for his baldness. There is an area of scarring on the top of his head. Scarring which is consistent with a burn.
In 1984, Jackson was at the height of his powers. His album Thriller had become the biggest selling album of all time. But filming a Pepsi commercial with his brothers would mark the start of his decline, when a pyrotechnic device set fire to his hair. suffered severe second and third degree burns to his scalp, which left him needing to wear wigs for the rest of his life.
The Pepsi incident changed Michael's career forever. Michael became extremely self-conscious about his appearance. He felt damaged, he felt hurt, he felt betrayed.
Following the incident with the fire, not only is he contending with a poor body image, but now, you know, his scalp is burned. He can't grow his hair anymore. And this is another reason to kind of feel he has to conceal something about himself. And here's the thing, when you feel you have to hide something, you know, the underside of that secrecy is shame. If people really knew, they wouldn't accept me. What's underneath this makeup? What's underneath this wig? And of course, the real kind of clincher there is that I can't accept who I am.
And Dr. Hunter has uncovered evidence that the accident triggered a dangerous and potentially deadly habit. On June 25th, 2009, pop megastar Michael Jackson died suddenly in Los Angeles, California. The world was shocked by his passing, asking why the king of pop died at just 50 years of age. Now, world-renowned forensic pathologist Dr. Michael Hunter is investigating Jackson's autopsy and uncovering hidden secrets from his life that could explain his death.
Michael Jackson was very conscious about his appearance. I know that he had vitiligo and that he bleached his skin. It's well known that Michael had had extensive plastic surgery on his face, but less known perhaps is the fact that he was wearing a wig after his scalp was burned in an accident. This was a traumatic accident, and I want to know how big an impact this had on his life.
Recovering from the injuries he sustained during the filming of the commercial, Jackson became hooked on painkillers. These were gateway drugs that led to multiple drug addictions.
A gateway drug is a softer drug that can lead the user onto more dangerous, more addictive drugs. And I can see Michael's dependence on drugs quickly escalated.
Over the years, Jackson also became dependent on sedatives, alcohol, anti-anxiety drugs, and even morphine. Without prescription drugs, he could not function, sing, dance, or perform.
I love you. I really do. You have to know that.
But 6 months before his death, Jackson announced a punishing schedule of 50 concerts.
I'll be performing the songs my fans want to hear. This is it. I mean, this is really it. This is the final curtain call.
But behind closed doors, the promoters AEG were concerned that Jackson wasn't up to performing his trademark high-energy routines. They began to question health scares published by the press. His personal doctor, Conrad Murray, assured them that apart from bouts of insomnia, Jackson was in good physical condition. But not everyone was so convinced. Terry Harvey is a music promoter with close links to the Jackson family.
How fit for someone that have to be in to perform for 2.5 hours in good shape? Do I think Michael didn't have the energy or the stamina for 50 nights? He did not have the stamina to do 30 minutes.
Michael knew deep down there was no way he'd be able to perform 50 shows. Michael told people close to him he didn't know if he could do 2 shows.
So what was the truth about Jackson's fitness? Was he really up to the tour?
I can see from the report that Michael is 136 pounds and is 5'9" tall, which gives him a BMI of 20.1, which is normal. Although he appears slightly thin, it is within the acceptable range. You might expect some atherosclerotic narrowing of the arteries in a man aged 50, but Michael Jackson had no evidence of this, and his heart was in good condition. So for a man of his age, he was in good shape.
June 19th, 2009, Los Angeles, California, 6 days before his death. Despite being in good shape, At rehearsals for his upcoming tour, Jackson was clearly in trouble. He seemed short of breath, stiff, and unable to perform his routines he was famous for. In the autopsy, Dr. Hunter has found a reason for this lackluster performance.
Several x-rays were taken of Michael Jackson, and they showed that he had osteoarthritis in some of his fingers and his spine. The vertebrae in the spine are cushioned by areas of cartilage. In osteoarthritis, the cartilage degenerates and the bones are left unprotected. This places pressure on the joints, and in extreme circumstances, the bones can grind together. This is a condition that would cause him pain, stiffness, and might limit his movements. It is degenerative. It will only get worse. And although this isn't uncommon for a man of 50, it can be triggered by an injury.
In 1999, Jackson did suffer an injury to his spine. During a concert in Germany, he plunged 50 feet into the orchestra pit. Although he carried on performing, he collapsed in agony soon afterwards. Osteoarthritis could explain why he was struggling with movement, but it couldn't explain why he was struggling to breathe.
Most of Michael's organs were in good condition for his age. The exception is his lungs. They were obviously diseased. The lining of the airways showed a lot of damage, and both lungs showed widespread inflammation and quite extensive scarring. For Michael Jackson, it would have made it harder to exert himself, and he would have fatigued more easily. The next question I would want to ask is what caused all this damage?
A possible explanation is written all over Jackson's face. In his mid-20s, he developed a symmetrical red rash around his cheeks.
This rash is a classic symptom of another rare skin disease, discoid lupus, which causes hair to fall out anywhere on the body and can damage the lips. I can see from the autopsy that Michael Jackson had dark tattoos on his eyebrows, and there were tattoos on his eyelids like eyeliner, and he'd also got tattoos in pink around his lips.
Lupus would also explain Jackson's habit of using umbrellas. This disease leaves skin sensitive to sunlight, and lupus doesn't only affect the skin, it can wreak havoc across the whole body.
Lupus is an autoimmune disease, and these diseases occur when the body attacks part of itself. White blood cells usually attack foreign invaders like infection in the body, but in lupus, these cells strike at the body itself, including lungs, leaving them heavily damaged. It is a chronic disease with episodes of remission and recurrence. And that recurrence can be triggered by any number of things, such as stress, exertion, and lack of sleep.
But is there another explanation for Jackson's lung damage? June 18, 2009, Los Angeles, California, 7 days before his death. For 25 years, an increasingly unstable and drug-dependent Jackson had been visiting the clinic of dermatologist Dr. Arnold Klein. According to those who worked there, these visits had become less and less about his skin.
He would be in the office a couple times a week, have very minor procedures done. When he got to the office, I would take him in the back door and put him in the procedure room. And at that point, I'd go get Dr. Klein's nurse, Ellen, and say, Michael's here and he wants a shot.
On every visit, he'd receive at least one injection. The syringe contained Demerol, a medical version of heroin.
Demerol is a powerful medication that belongs to a class of drugs known as opioids. It works in the brain to change how your body feels and responds to pain. It's frequently used in hospitals to treat moderate to severe pain.
Usually the effects were pretty quick. He might pass out, he might be just tired, he might be loopy.
And Jackson didn't always come to see Dr. Klein alone.
If he was with the kids, that would be a little bit of a distraction for him. The kids would usually sit in Dr. Klein's office. They'd be running and screaming and joking, and it would be a lot of fun. until Michael got really out of it.
As the tour approached, Jackson's requests for these injections became more and more frequent.
He would come in and he would demand to see Dr. Klein quickly. He would want his shot of Demerol as quickly as possible. And you could tell that there was something going on.
The euphoric effects of Demerol make it highly addictive, and it shouldn't be used to treat long-term pain. By taking this drug consistently, Michael Jackson risked overdose and death.
On June 25th, 2009, global superstar Michael Jackson was discovered not breathing in his Beverly Hills home. Despite resuscitation attempts by paramedics at the scene and a team of doctors at the hospital, he was pronounced dead at 2:26 p.m. His was a life of controversy, and his death was no different. Now Dr. Michael Hunter is investigating all of the evidence to answer the question, how did Michael Jackson die?
The autopsy shows that there was no significant injuries to the body, and there was no evidence of any significant disease except to the lungs. And so to understand what was really going on inside Michael's body in the time before his death, I need to turn to the toxicology report.
Jackson had well-publicized problems with prescription drugs. He'd been in rehab and had admitted to addictions to painkillers. In 2009, he was also having frequent injections of Demerol, a pharmacological equivalent of heroin. By early June, Jackson was struggling at the rehearsals for his This Is It tour.
Demerol is an incredibly powerful drug. So if you were to turn up at rehearsals on it, you'd be disoriented, you'd be dizzy, and you also may struggle with shortness of breath. Now, this is literally the opposite of what is required when you're performing.
But in just 19 days, Jackson is due to embark on his record-breaking 50-date residency in London.
Michael Jackson's mind was not ready. While publicly he was telling people, yes, I can do this, it was clear by the way he was not turning up to rehearsals, ignoring important production meetings. This man was not ready for the This Is It comeback.
I think a big part of the way that Michael got through things was kind of keeping things to himself, pretending things were okay, and bar from, I think, very few people around him, it's alleged, he tried really hard to kind of not let that come out.
The situation became so desperate, the tour's producer Kenny Ortega sent an impassioned email to the producers.
My concern is he appeared quite weak and fatigued this evening. He had a terrible case of the chills, was trembling, rambling, and obsessing. Everything in me says he should be psychologically evaluated. Oh, I believe that he really wants this. It would shatter him, break his heart if we pulled the plug. He's terribly frightened. It's all going to go away. It broke my heart. He was like a lost boy. There still may be a chance he can rise to the occasion if we get him the help he needs.
June 24th, 2009, Los Angeles, California, the day before his death. The promoters issue Jackson an ultimatum: shape up or they'll pull the plug. $400 million in debt. For Jackson, this is not an option.
It was clear that this was about the money being on the line. For Michael, he didn't have a choice. He had to be there or he would lose his home, his kids would be homeless, and he would be in financial ruin.
June 19th, 2009, Los Angeles, California, 6 days before his death. As this footage shows, 5 days earlier, Jackson had been struggling at the rehearsals. He seemed sluggish and not in control of his body. But the effect of the promoter's threat was stunning. June 24th, 2009. His next performance was described as electric by members of the production team. He was agile, lively, and like the Michael Jackson of old.
Suddenly, he makes a miraculous recovery. He gets on stage, he performs 30 to 40 minutes, and he's dancing, he's singing and performing in a way which make them a lot happier.
So how did a 50-year-old man with osteoarthritis, lupus, scarred lungs, and an addiction to Demerol manage to turn it around? Dr. Hunter has found that the clues lie in Jackson's body and in yet another narcotic,
Extensive toxicology testing was done on numerous samples taken from Michael's body. Now, in the urine sample, it was noted that a drug called ephedrine was present. Ephedrine is similar to the naturally occurring adrenaline in the body. And adrenaline is a hormone that prepares the body for fight or flight. When Michael took ephedrine, it would have been to energize himself.
Jackson had turned to yet another drug. In his house, police discovered tablets of ECA, a powerful stimulant made from caffeine, aspirin, and ephedrine. At high levels, this drug can trigger cardiac failure, the ultimate cause of Jackson's death.
Because the ephedrine is only present in the urine and not in the blood, it can't be having an effect on Michael's body when he dies. So it can't have contributed to his death.
But the autopsy throws up a further narcotic surprise.
The toxicology analysis definitely looked for, but did not find Demerol. And this tells me that Michael hadn't been taking the drug for some time.
June 25th, 2009, 12:30 a.m., Los Angeles, California, 14 hours before his death. Jackson makes it through his make-or-break rehearsal by loading his body with stimulants and coming off the heroin-like drug, Demerol. But as he returns to his Carrollwood mansion, this strategy will have deadly repercussions.
The effects of withdrawing from Demerol can be very difficult. In fact, if you try to do it on your own, it's downright dangerous. You'll get a fever, you'll suffer aches and pains, and one of the biggest side effects is insomnia.
Jackson has been plagued by this sleeping disorder throughout his adult life. Now he's full of stimulants and in withdrawal from Demerol. But his doctor, Conrad Murray, has no idea Jackson had been taking this drug, let alone that he'd suddenly stopped. Michael Jackson hid his drug habits well.
While at the location conducting one of several searches, we located a number of bottles of prescription medication, not only in Mr. Jackson's name, but in 4 or 5 aliases.
Although the majority of these drugs were prescribed by Murray, some were recorded with other doctors' names.
I'm not saying he was devious. He's the king of manipulation. He was the puppet master. He can tell you what you want to hear and look like it's real, and guess what? You go, okay, he's all right. Come on, let's go.
Someone like Michael, who lived in an adult world since he was a child, would have meant that he was very good at controlling situations, being able to acquire the drugs, right? You know, an average person, there's so many barriers to doing this, right? For him, number one, most of those barriers are taken away, sort of the money, the privacy, all of that. But then beyond that as well, he's someone with a lot of power and clout. He's also someone who probably is able to not just read a situation, but speak in a language that makes people feel safe, or, you know, or whatever the case may be. So I think he would have probably found it easier than the average person to get what he wanted.
And Murray is ripe for manipulation. Like Jackson, he's deep in debt. If the tour doesn't go ahead, he too will be financially ruined. One of his roles is to ensure Jackson could sleep, but the autopsy report suggests this was problematic.
He does have an enlarged prostate, which is not at all unusual for a 50-year-old man. And this might mean he has some difficulty in urination and may have the urge to use the toilet more often.
Michael had a condom catheter that he used during his sleep time so that he did not have to wake up or be woken up to go in and use the bathroom.
But Murray's master plan to get Jackson to sleep also has a more sinister pharmaceutical element.
One drug really stands out in the toxicology, and that is propofol. Propofol is an anesthetic agent that you usually only see in operating rooms and intensive care units. It's a very powerful drug. Due to its appearance and effects, it's sometimes known as milk of amnesia.
Jackson has been using propofol as a sleep aid for nearly a decade.
In early 2000s, he was in the hospital one time. They administered Michael propofol, and He said he really liked the drug and became dependent on it and would get doctors to administer it to him.
Over the years, this dependency escalated.
He called me up one Sunday night and he says, Jason, I need an anesthesiologist. And I said, what do you need an anesthesiologist for, Michael? And he says, well, I've got a media spot in the morning and I need to be fresh for it. I said, this is crazy. I said, I don't understand. I had never in my life heard of anything like this, ever. I was just flabbergasted.
By June 2009, Conrad Murray is feeding Jackson's propofol addiction in the star's own house. For Jackson, it is the ideal drug.
Propofol is a really useful drug as the person goes to sleep quickly and they wake up cleanly with no hangover. But the line between risk and use is very narrow, and too much of the drug without constant monitoring can cause a fatality.
June 25th, 2009, 1:05 a.m., Los Angeles, California. Murray has been giving Jackson propofol for 60 nights in a row. But aware of the promoter's ultimatum, he has decided to wean Jackson off the drug. So what exactly happened to Michael Jackson that meant in less than 14 hours, he would be dead? He was one of the most famous performers the world had ever seen. But on June 25th, 2009, Michael Jackson died in the UCLA Medical Center. Now, world-renowned forensic pathologist Dr. Michael Hunter is examining the singer's autopsy and toxicology report to understand the events that led to his death at the age of just 50.
For many years of his life, Michael Jackson had managed to survive on a cocktail of medications. One of the most alarming was anesthetic propofol, which he had heavily relied on to help him sleep for a decade. However, I know his doctor had decided to wean Michael off propofol. So at this point, I can't determine what role this drug played in his death. I wonder, what else had Michael been taking at this point?
June 25th, 2009, 1:10 a.m., Los Angeles, California, 13 and a half hours before his death. For the last 2 nights, Dr. Conrad Murray has sent Jackson off to sleep using drugs called benzodiazepines, and he has administered them in an unusual way.
The autopsy report shows an injection site on the inner part of the left knee. This is a very rare site for any medical or resuscitation treatment, but it can be common for intravenous drug abuse. Unlike on the arms, an injection site on the knee is hidden away and keeps the drug abuse secret.
June 25th, 2009, 1:30 a.m., Los Angeles, California, 13 hours before his death. Conrad Murray gives Jackson a pill he hopes will help him sleep.
I can see there is Valium in the system. Now, Valium is a benzodiazepine drug which is used to treat anxiety, but it commonly causes sedation. It is an addictive drug, and long-term use can lead to physical dependence.
2 a.m., 12 and a half hours before his death. Jackson is still awake. Murray turns to a faster-acting benzodiazepine sedative, lorazepam. 3 a.m. Jackson still hasn't fallen asleep, so Murray tries a third benzodiazepine, midazolam.
It may be a little unusual to find 3 different kinds of benzodiazepines at the same time, but it seems likely that if the intent is to get someone to sleep, one would start with a long-acting Valium-type drug, move to a medium-acting lorazepam, and then finally try the very short-acting midazolam. So in this situation, it makes sense.
7 a.m., 7 and a half hours before his death. Throughout the early hours, Murray gives Jackson more and more benzodiazepines, but they have no effect. 10 a.m., 4 and a half hours before his death. A desperate Jackson asks for his drug of choice, his milk. He wants propofol, but Murray resists. Jackson claims he can't function without sleep and will have to cancel the concerts. 10:50 a.m. Conrad Murray finally relents and prepares a dose of propofol. As this drug burns when it enters the body, Murray adds a local anesthetic, lidocaine, to numb the pain. Jackson is unconscious at last. "15 minutes later, Conrad Murray re-enters the singer's bedroom. Jackson is not breathing, but Murray thinks he can feel a pulse. He searches for flumazenil, a drug that reverses the effects of the benzodiazepines. But there is no such antidote for propofol.
Sir, we have a gentleman here that needs help, and he's not breathing yet. He's not breathing. Trying to pump him, but he's not. Okay. Okay, how old is he? He's 50 years old, sir. 50. Okay. He's not breathing, sir. Okay, and he's not conscious either. He's not conscious, sir. Okay. Is he on the floor? Where's he at right now? He's on the bed, sir. He's on the bed. Okay, let's get him on the floor. Okay. Okay, let's get him down to the floor. We have to CPR right now, okay? We need him. We need a chest. We're already on our way there. We're on our way. I'm going to do this, but I can't help you over the phone. We're already on our way. Did anybody see him? Yes, we have a personal doctor here with him, sir. Oh, you have a doctor there? Yes, but he's not responding to CPR or anything. Okay. Did anybody witness what happened? No, just the doctor, sir. The doctor's been the only one here. He's pumping his chest, but he's not responding to anything, sir. Please. Okay. Okay. We're on our way.
By the time the paramedics arrive, Murray can no longer detect a pulse. Jackson's body is rushed to the hospital, but it's too late. At 2:26 p.m. on June 25, 2009, Michael Joseph Jackson was declared dead at the UCLA Medical Center. After examining all the evidence, Dr. Hunter can now finally reveal the cause of the King of Pop's untimely death. For 5 decades, he was one of the most famous singers in showbiz. But on June 25, 2009, the world was shocked to hear that Michael Jackson had died. Forensic pathologist Dr. Michael Hunter has been scrutinizing the results of the autopsy and toxicology report to understand what happened in the final days and hours of Jackson's life.
The autopsy report concludes that his cause of death was acute propofol intoxication, with a contributory factor in the death being benzodiazepines. Once in the bloodstream, both of these drugs spread around the body, and when they reach the brain, they have a profound neurosuppressive effect on respiration. They slow the rate the lungs inflate and deflate, critically decreasing their ability to oxygenate the body. It's important to remember that Michael had pre-existing lung disease. Now, these things combine to cause the oxygen in his bloodstream to drop precipitously, starving his heart and brain of oxygen, causing him to arrest and die.
2 months after his death, the autopsy results were announced.
The LA County coroner has ruled Michael Jackson's death a homicide.
The prime suspect was Dr. Conrad Murray. He was tried for involuntary manslaughter. At the trial, the smoking gun was propofol.
Conrad Murray states that he gave Michael 25 milligrams of propofol at 10:40 a.m. Yet the toxicology report suggests that there was more than that in his bloodstream when he died. So the question is, how can I explain this discrepancy?
In court, Murray claimed that this anomaly was not of his doing. He suggested it was all down to the other person in the room, Jackson himself.
And Dr. Murray left the room. Michael Jackson self-administered a dose, an additional dose of propofol. And it killed him. And it killed him like that, and there was no way to save him.
But the prosecution had a different version of events. A version that implicated Murray as guilty.
Conrad Murray's actions directly caused the death of Michael Jackson.
They claimed Murray had put together a system that kept Jackson continually supplied with propofol while he slept. Murray cut into the lid of the bottle of the drug. Once in a saline bag, the propofol could then infuse constantly into Jackson's bloodstream. Normally, saline coming down from the bag mixes with drugs injected at a port and washes them into the body. The prosecution maintains the drug was already mixed with the saline, so there should be traces of propofol in the tube above the injection port. Despite testing, traces of the drug were never detected. Yet this didn't sway the jury.
I am advised that the jury has reached a verdict.
We, the jury in the above entitled action, find the defendant, Conrad Robert Murray, guilty of the crime of involuntary manslaughter.
And the autopsy supports the court's verdict. Conrad Murray failed in his duty as a doctor.
Propofol is a very powerful anesthetic, and there is a very fine line between its proper effect and causing death. In the hospital setting, an anesthesiologist would typically have the patient attached to numerous machines that would monitor pulse and blood pressure, carbon dioxide levels, and oxygen levels.
But investigators found no evidence of any medical monitors in the mansion. Murray was sentenced to 4 years in prison for the killing of the King of Pop. In a 40-year career, Michael Jackson had established himself as the most successful act of all time. But his success had long been underpinned by his reliance on prescription drugs.
It was such a tragedy seeing him go from this huge, larger-than-life figure down this road of drug dependency. These drugs had turned him into just a shell of his former self.
He didn't have a choice. He was around $400 million in debt. This is it. It was his make or break comeback.
He was on a path of destruction. When you walk off into that devil's den, some of us make it out, some of us don't.
Jackson's life had been full of turmoil and controversy. Conrad Murray, he hired a doctor who ultimately failed him. From the moment they met, Michael's fate was sealed.
Michael Jackson was a man with numerous physical and psychological problems. And to overcome these, he had spiraled into drug dependency and addiction. He was using dangerous drugs in an untested manner. In some ways, it's a miracle that he lasted as long as he did.